Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotello, and special guest host this week, JJ Purdom.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, wow. Well, we don't have Evan this week. Normally he's here. We've done, I think, 15 straight shows, but he, had to take the week off because it's July the 4th. For those of you who may be watching it some other date, tomorrow will be July 4th. So we have a nice late night session going with just instead of Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast, it's Wrestling and Everything Coast.
Yes, just because we're on the one side. What some people
there is no two coasts. It's coast to inland. It's basically JJ's over in Newman, California. So about 4 hours east. That's about as far as down the coast as we're or across the coast as we're getting to this week. But so it's a little bit of a different episode. JJ and I have known each other for I counted it up, and it is pretty close to 20 years that we've known each other. It's like about 18.
You look the exact same. You look. I look a lot older, and you look the exact same. I do want to say real quick, get into the show.
That's true. Because you've lost about a person's worth of weight.
Yeah, as of late, I've lost 122 pounds. But I'll tell you what, methamphetamine is so much cheaper than it used to be, and you can literally find it anywhere.
I knew you can.
And you know what? The only problem is that I take a lot of stuff apart, and I have a hard time putting it back together. But I've got ridiculous energy. But before we get into the show, Russ, I just real quick want to say my thoughts and prayers are out to Evan Ginsberg this week. Evan not able to be on the show. The normal host apparently hurt his hips dancing because he has to do that on the weekends for money. And Evan, I know you that flossing move that the kids are trying now, and I'm sorry. And you're going to be just white as rain by next week. So. There's nothing wrong with it. It's my favorite stuff.
You gotta love it. Well, that's what we filled the airways with when we were doing California Championship Wrestling. When we did do one of the first broadcasts that Comcast Cable had that included wrestling. We were the first show. It wasn't good. It wasn't a good show, but we were first. So they had a little community sports thing that they had going on.
Yeah, we were on Comcast On Demand, which was an on-demand. It was now everything's on demand, but it was one of the first on-demand channels throughout the whole Bay Area of California. And yeah, I thought for the time it was great. I was so happy as the guy who was booking stuff and who was doing announcing and everything, of course, with yourself. And I thought it was great. So when everybody said man, but you guys are putting really bad stuff on TV, I was like, man, they need to shut up. We're on television, for crying out loud. And now I look back at some of the footage and I'm blown away because we were really putting out horrible stuff. And I would never suggest to do it, but we were doing something. I mean, that's the point, right?
We meant well. We plus we were working with just some of the worst equipment, that you could get your hands on. And so, but it's still what we did at California Championship Wrestling was a pretty wonderful dream for me, and really got me involved in the nuts and bolts of how a wrestling federation really grows from absolutely nothing into something. And what we had was something. I mean, you think about some of the talent that worked at the CCW shows. Brian Cage worked our show.
Oh, yeah. There was plenty. There was plenty of guys who came through our small
Thatcher. Look at what a big guy Thatcher is now.
That's right. Timothy Thatcher, who's currently wrestling for WWE NXT, and he's doing a phenomenal job, was just recently part of a tag team and then a couple of great matches against Matt Riddle recently at NXT. Timothy Thatcher, one of the sweetest people in the whole world. And my hat's off to him. He's just a beautiful person.
And a funny guy.
He's hilarious. One time I did a show with Timothy and the rest of the crew at a company called SPW, Supreme Pro Wrestling. They're based out of Sacramento, California, our capital. And I went and did a show, and I broke down in the worst area possible, which I'm about 5'3", 5'4". I try to tell people 5'5", it's a lie. Technically, I'm probably only 5'3". I mean, let's be honest. But at the time, I had a 3-piece suit on. I broke down at 1 o'clock in the morning at the corner of Fruit Ridge and Stockton Boulevard. Horrible area.
Really?
Anybody,
I used to live on, I'm not kidding. I used to live on 47th Avenue and Fruit Ridge.
Really?
So that's my first 2 years in Sacramento. We're living there because I was my first 2 years of law school. And I figured if I was going to go to law school anywhere, might as well just live in the worst place in the world because I'm not going to spend any time there. I was going to be in school the whole time. But
yeah, well, when I broke down, I actually ended up getting enough gas. I had to go with a little gas tank, went back and got a little bit of gas, and then I went back over, and Tim Thatcher helped me out tremendously. But when I broke down, I actually was on the phone with a buddy of mine, and I was telling him he's from the Sacramento area, and I was telling him where I was at. And I remember specifically, Tim was so great because Tim helped me, but my friend said to me, JJ, wait a second, man. Where'd you say you broke down? Stockton Boulevard and Fruit Ridge? Oh, JJ, bro, man. You're in the wrong area. You're too white. You're too little and fat, man. You could get raped. Run. You know, so, I mean, and of course, I'm not built for cardio, so I did not run. And I think it would have been even worse if I was running with a gas can in a 3-piece suit at 1 o'clock in the morning. I didn't. And thank God Tim was such a well-shaped dude. He's always in great shape. And I felt like I was protected when he went down there with me a short time later, you know? So
wow,
just wanted to say that Timothy Thatcher is a quality human being.
Oh, absolutely. No, he was great to work with. We had some other great talent there. I mean, we had Simon Gotch, you know, wrestled for us a ton of times. Wasn't the world's easiest person to work with. Chupacabra should have gotten a chance in the WWE, you know. But I guess he could still come out of retirement, but I don't think he hasn't been doing very much as far as I know.
A show with Taylor Correa with
oh, did he? Okay.
Oh, yeah, and that guy's still in phenomenal shape. he looks fantastic.
Yeah, but he's getting there in years. I mean, all the stuff we did back in CCW now is like over 15 years old. Think about that. We started it in 2006, you know.
I got nothing, Russ. It's made me feel super old, buddy. So, no.
It's just time, man. It's just time. Time has moved that forwards to that large of a degree. But we saw a lot of cool stuff happen in CCW. I couldn't have had, for what I did, and you know, we talked about it when we had you on the show before. You said, you know, it took a lot out of you, and it was such a difficult situation for you to deal with. But as far as I was concerned, I didn't feel like it was the worst thing. I think it was great. You know, it was really to do all the things I wanted to be able to do, and to be basically a star, or like, you know, in the Heenan type role, evil managerial role for CCW was just great. I just loved it.
Yeah, you know what? I shouldn't say it like it was all negative. There was a lot of positives. I had some negative stuff that came out of all the excess work, but the actually putting together a show, that stuff is fantastic. I had a good time. There's some great memories running that stuff. You know, one of the things we talked about last time was booking really good angles that play out and have reason and thought behind them. But one of the things that you and I normally love to talk about, and I love to talk about on today's show if we could, is bad angles, notoriously bad angles, and what we could possibly have done, or anybody else could have possibly done, to possibly make some of those angles better. Because I know, we're talking things like Katie Vick, you know, the Katie Vick angle with, you know, the molestation of a mannequin in a casket that WWE did.
That was pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many horrible, the gobbledygooker, there's stuff, and why not have a couple of guys from the best coast of California talk about how they geniusly would, from an armchair, book these things a little bit better, to not be so bad.
Well, that's a great, I mean, obviously we could talk about, you know, wrestling from today. I was just before you said you hadn't watched in a while, but just before I did the podcast, I tuned in and watched at least in half an hour. There was both The Miz and Baron at the same time, and that was enough for me to like go, okay, I've seen enough. I'm enjoying AEW more, and I kind of like the booking that AEW is doing. I like the NWA product before it kind of is. I don't know how NWA is going to survive the COVID crisis.
They have, of course, everybody is talking right now about the whole thing with wrestlers, getting blasted. Everybody speaking out, the speaking out movement, and Dave Lagana was unfortunately one of those people who was called out. He explained the entire thing, but out of respect and deference to the NWA, he stepped down. The NWA, of course, we all know is the oldest surviving professional wrestling organization. It's not what it once was. It was made in 1948. What has been happening with the resurgence of what the NWA is, the TV show NWA Power, is one of the best things on television. Of course, it's usually been on YouTube each and every week and on the Fight TV app as well. NWA has come up with some other content that is just phenomenal. Carneyland. They've come up with some really great stuff, not just NWA Power, but it's usually 1 hour. NWA Power is 1 hour of studio wrestling presented like it was back in the day. And it's meta, it's great. There's comedy, there's drama, there's that small feel. I really love what the NWA Power show is all about, and I can't wait for them to get back to the point where they have an audience and can put more live wrestling events out. But the extra content that the NWA has been doing lately is really, really fantastic, and it's exactly what I have a flavor for. So as far as like wrestling that's happening on TV right now, I'll watch stuff on YouTube occasionally, but I sure don't have 3 hours to watch on Mondays and 2 hours on Fridays and 2 hours on Wednesdays for AEW and 2 hours for NXT. I've got kids, to quote Pete.
No, and I've said it with Evan too, but I'll say it again with you, which is that, when we were younger, when we were kids, the concept of watching wrestling, you had to really hunt around to find it. It was like you got an hour of it on Saturday night. Saturday during the day, you had TBS that would have Mid-South or then moved into the NWA or WCW, from like 3:05 to like 5 o'clock. You get 2 hours on a Saturday. You get like some rerun wrestling on Sunday. And then you'd have Monday Night Raw. And that was it, for a number of years. And so, I remember before a time with Monday Night Raw, they had Tuesday Night Titans, which you could watch. But I remember even before that. And so finding wrestling was like a really rare circumstance. And if you found it.
You must have been a little different than me, Russ, because I had everything memorized. So I knew that at 11 o'clock on Saturday, I watched WWF Superstars at 3:05, or what they called on TBS 6:05, the Superstation. TBS at 3:05, I would watch WCW Saturday night. Before that, it was World Championship Wrestling, of course, when it was the NWA. And then I would watch at 6:05. I'd wake up on 6:05 a.m. in the morning on Saturday mornings, and I'd watch Power Hour, WCW Power Hour. There was always something on. All American. There was Wrestling Challenge, WWF All American, WWF Wrestling Challenge on Sundays, and then on Monday night.
You're a little bit younger than I am, so I'm talking like how it was when I was even younger, and we were talking the 70s, the late 70s, before Hulk Hogan won the championship. It was hard to find wrestling as a really little kid. There was big time wrestling on Saturdays that they would have, and that was really it. The WWF or the WWF at that time didn't have a national program that you could watch in the 70s. It was just Roy Shire's big time wrestling that we had, and that was it. And then, later, right around the early 80s, the WWE and TBS rolled out cable, and that's when we got to see stuff like Mid-South Wrestling. But there was a good amount of time, probably the first. I didn't really see like a WWF program till maybe I was about 14 years old, maybe close to 15. 'Cause that's just when it was available on regular TV. Whereas opposed to the older AWA matches, because the Bay Area was a AWA territory. That would get covered more by the Shire program, and you'd see more stuff like that, and some NWA talent, but it was mostly AWA folks during that time.
That same Roy Shire area in the Bay Area had one of the most incredible angles that I know they did around the loop with Pepper Gomez and Ray Stevens. It was the jumping off of the ladder and then
on his stomach.
Yes, and so that angle was done several places. I wish that they still did angles like that now.
Well, we were talking about that. Yeah, we were talking about that. So, tell me something like if you okay, what would be an angle to you that could have been better but didn't work out, and where do you think it went wrong? What should have been done instead?
That's an interesting question, because there's a lot of times that there just isn't a payoff, that they just kind of drop stuff. There was a GTV thing. I don't know if you remember back in the 90s, the late 90s. Wrestling wasn't it was in a hot period, but it wasn't like great TV. It was I think Vince was writing at the time. Vince Russo was writing WWF, and he came up with GTV, which was like a hidden camera thing.
And yeah, that's right. Okay, yes, I remember now.
Couple of different options that they were going to go for is they had a guy named Vic Grimes, who at one point was from ours. Yeah, and he's a friend of ours, and he was actually supposed to be the guy behind that at one point. And there was also Goldust at one point was going to have that, apparently. I would have liked to have seen something like that if they were using this hidden footage. It just seemed like it was not going anywhere. What's the point of using it? So why not take it and put it on somebody who's gonna, like a new character? In fact, I think they were doing something really similar recently, where they were going to give it to Mustafa Ali, a very similar gimmick where he was a hacker and was kind of like watching over people, and they apparently scrapped it again. So realized that the angle, we didn't run its course 20 years ago. Let's try it again. And we're not really getting anywhere with it. I think that they just get I'm not getting anything out of this angle right now, and I'm quick to just throw in the towel and give up. And if anything, that's one of the things that we try to do when we were promoting events, is you have to stay the course. There has to be a beginning, there has to be a middle, and there has to be an end. What's the end goal? Where are you wanting to go?
You have to think of the end first, actually. You really have to think of how it's going to end, because then you can color in the lines in between. But if you don't have a good finish, but we don't consider now specialty matches as a finish anymore to a feud, where that's how it used to be done in wrestling. You'd have a bull rope or a four corners match, or a cage match, something like that. Once that match was over, one guy got so beaten up that was the end of the feud. Now that's just, you have a table, ladders, chairs, match thrown right in the middle, just because happens to be a pay-per-view event going on.
One time I did an event, I won't tell you the name of the little company that I was working for, but I did an event that had 15 people in the audience. And it every match on the card, and I think there was like 11 matches. This is with 15 people, 15 people in the audience, because you could stand up there while I was doing the ring announcing and I could count them.
I've done those shows too.
And we were trying to, film it for TV. So you have all 15 of the people get onto one side of the ring. So, so that way, so three sides are completely empty. And it's in an attempt to make it look like the audience is a little larger. And that was actually at my request because they didn't know what they were going to do. Hey, we were going to try to film this for TV, and they had rented all these cameras. And then I said, why don't you put everybody over on the hard cam side, And they're like, no. And then 2 minutes later, hey, get everybody over on the hard cam side. Okay. So don't want to take my advice, but want to, and so 15 people, all 11 matches were specialty matches. And this was meant to be taped for some type of a TV show that they were attempting to try to pilot. And talking, one of them was a glass Taipei death match where they had vats of glue and glass, and they basically punching each other. And after that, they had a ladder match, and the people in the ladder match got cut up from all the glass that was in the ring. And it was just violence for the sake of violence. It was really crappy wrestling, horribly done, unfortunately. And it was just really poorly booked. I've never seen any footage of it. I doubt that it ever made air, to be perfect.
Thank God for that. No, you're talking about better booking ideas. I would have just done a booking idea that would have made a lot more sense and would have saved a guy's career. And that is when Goldberg was trying to attack Bret Hart, and Bret Hart got in the limo, and Goldberg uses his bare arm to smash a non-gadgeted window and breaks the glass and cuts his arm and almost dies from severing an artery and major tendon cuts and all that stuff. Why didn't he just use a crowbar or a bat or a steel pipe laying around, or you make a candy glass window that like they use in Hollywood stunts?
I could be wrong, but I think that he thought that it was gimmicked because he was told to smash the window. So I think he thought it was gimmicked.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, and it wasn't, obviously.
I'm not blaming Goldberg on that. I'm blaming the guys who told him, and that was Russo, to smash a window that wasn't gadgeted. That's right. About the dumbest booking idea you can possibly come up with.
Yeah. Goldberg's whole thing, why he was so popular, is he had intensity, and he did everything with intensity, and he was just jacked up to 9 the entire time. I can see it letting the spirit of the moment. You've been there when you have a crowd cheering for you and they're going, you've never had that, obviously.
Yeah.
But Pat, but when you have the crowd jeering you and hating on you, that fuels you because that's a response that you're wanting. And so sometimes you'll be doing things like hitting a window to bust it, not realizing this thing is not working, but I'm just going to, manhandle it. He almost cost himself his arm. It was horrible. It was horrible.
But why they didn't book him and just say, here's a lead pipe, go and break it with the pipe. No, it wouldn't have made him look less macho or anything like that. Or you make a stunt window that, breaks, nobody in Hollywood, you never hear of anyone in Hollywood nearly losing their arm because somebody forgets to put in a stunt window. Or let's put it this way. What if Marty Jannetty had gone through a real window after Shawn Michaels kicked him through? If they hadn't they left a real window in there, when they kicked through the glass, the kick that shattered the world, of professional wrestling. That was a big angle, though, when it happened. Yeah. That was one that was a brilliant.
It was, and you know what? It's also one of those fantastic angles that for a little while it didn't continue because of Marty's trouble, Marty's habits, and getting into fights and having issues with things like drugs. And thankfully, they were able to capitalize on that later when he shows up out of the crowd during a live Monday Night Raw taping. And this was shortly after Monday Night Raw started, so it was within the first couple of months.
When they were still doing those, the ones in the Manhattan Center.
The Manhattan Center. I think this was May of '93, and they started in January of '93.
Those were cool shows, by the way.
It was raw. It was totally raw. They were just, if something happens, it was meant to happen, and now everything is so homogenized and it's so clean that you don't get any of the sense of roughness. It's like, man, everything is beautiful. I got to say, like the wrestlers now are so much better of athletes. They're so much better looking and everything else. Yeah, they're not like, roided out like crazy, but they're leaner. They're in great shape. They just are phenomenal. Never miss a step. But I like it to be gritty, a little more realistic. It doesn't mean they have to hard way each other and do the. I don't like the strong style. I don't think you need to legitimately beat the crap out of each other. That's just not my thing. I like seeing a good, awesome catch-as-catch-can wrestling match. That's what I enjoy. I like a little.
You won't see the likes of Killer Tim Brooks make his way up the circuit any longer.
No, I don't see that happening any longer.
He just died too.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's why I bring him up.
Buddy. Heartless that you brought him up like that. You'll never see Tim because he's dead, buddy. Because he's dead. Who does that? We're gonna get hate mail now.
But you go forget if we get any kind of mail, that'll be a first. But
Alexander, who was my boss at APW, I got a chance to know him right at the end. He would say that any publicity is good publicity, and I don't know if that's necessarily true, but hey,
he wasn't all that thrilled when they called him a carny in Beyond the Mat, though.
That's true. He embraced it later. He did embrace it later.
Well, that brings up another story. You know that I was actually when Roland saw Beyond the Mat the first time. He went to they had just done an SBW match the night before, and they stayed the night over in Sacramento, and they decided to go to the cinema theaters in Century Theaters in downtown Sacramento, and my brother and I just decided to go see Beyond the Mat at the exact same time, at the exact same showing, in the exact same theater. My brother and I were sitting down, and right in front of us, in the row in front of us, which was not planned at all, Modest, Donovan Morgan, Robert Thompson, Roland Alexander, Betty Beefcake, and they all come in and sit down right in front of us. And I was like, oh my God, guys, I can't believe it. So we all watched the movie together, and then we sat and we went over to TGI Fridays, which is right across the street from the theater, to like break down Roland's impression of the movie and what everybody else thought. Oh, Max Justice was there too. So it's like, just like you couldn't miss this row of just giant people all sitting right in front of you. But it was very funny that they wound up seeing the movie at the exact same time that we were. And that was, again, like you're talking almost 20 years ago, over 15 years ago. And, Beyond the Mat still stands out as like a really interesting slice of time in my own life.
It's still a phenomenal movie. But you know what else is a really phenomenal movie? I don't know if you've mentioned it lately on the show, but 350 Days.
Yes,
Evan Ginsberg has just truly knocked it out of the park, man. You've got to see this movie. If you're a wrestling fan, even if you're not a wrestling fan, 350 Days is fantastic. Do you happen to have the website? Is it 350days.com or where
Yeah,
would
you can also there's a Facebook site for it as well. You just type 350 Days in Facebook, and you can get to the Facebook page for it. And it's
don't walk, run to go get that.
You can see it for free on TubiTV.com. So people are like, oh, well, I can't rent it, or I don't have Amazon, or anything like that. You get commercials, but you still get to see the whole thing. And I couldn't agree with you more. It really gives a perspective on wrestling that I think a lot of people thought they knew something about, but didn't really know about. And once you hear about what these guys are like, and what it was like when the cameras are off, and what they have to go through, that really changes, I think, your whole view. We've seen it though. You and I have seen it. We've seen like the lack of glamour. We've had the big names that worked shows with 50 people or less in them, what we call the bomb scares, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, now in the days of COVID, maybe a 15-person audience actually is something you'd be proud of, you know, exactly, because you're at least not breaking any major codes, any civil codes by having 50. Evan said that there was a show in New York where they had a drive-in. It was a drive-in wrestling instead of a drive-in movie theater. They had people drive their cars in around a ring, and the wrestlers got in the ring and wrestled.
By any means necessary. That kind of sounds like some of our booking habits back in the mid 2000s.
Well, making the show just go on doesn't always just happen. Yeah, we definitely had some crazy moments, especially when Charles, who we were working with, who was working down in San Diego or Riverside, I guess. He had to drive up like for every show from Southern California to make the show.
Yeah, he was living in San Diego, and so it made it really difficult because he was driving and he was going through the process of nasty divorce at the time while he was trying to run a wrestling company and doing military service. So he was driving the 6+ hours up to us to do the show. And the first show, he actually ran out of gas and had to like get gas, and it was like a whole ordeal. He showed up at the venue late after we had already started the show and everything else. Every wrestling show when you first start out, you end up having issues. And I think that actually the first time that we ever tried to do an event, we didn't have our ducks in a row, and they canceled it on us. They decided that our wasn't good. And the guy who got stuck holding the bag and telling everybody, sorry, but no show, was yours truly, you sir.
Yeah, both of us. Well, I remember standing at the gate and telling people that we're driving up for the match. And we would have drawn like around 400 to 500 that night. We were doing pretty good on promoting that show. And I just had to say, nope, sorry, sorry to disappoint you. Yeah, the folks over at the Alameda County Fairgrounds were not the world's easiest people to work with, And
I always want to have insurance and all that kind of stuff. Who needs it?
That's true too. But they had told Charles that he could be on their rider, and then at the last second they pulled that off of there. And it's insurance thing. When you think about how tough it was to get insurance before COVID-19, now how hard it would be to insure a show with COVID-19 in place, and how I don't even know how AEW is managing to do the shows that they're doing. I don't know what kind of testing they do on all the personnel and how they're able. I mean, someone once asked, do wrestling mats get cleaned? Thank you. Thank you for that response.
Let's be completely honest. What we would do at our events, and what I think some do, is Lysol the crap out of it afterwards, and that's to try to kill any things like ringworm and some bacteria. But you got a lot of sweat and sometimes blood on that stuff, and it's pretty darn gnarly, dude. A wrestling mat is a pretty nasty place.
It's true. I mean, the only thing I can think of worse is the bathrooms.
And some of the bathrooms I've been in are actually cleaner than some of the wrestling rings I've been in. I don't know if you were aware of that or not. It's just, I've been in some really nasty wrestling rings. So,
but an indie wrestling show bathroom usually turns into maybe the worst hellhole the most unsanitary hellhole you can possibly get into. I don't know what goes on with the wrestlers, but their aim when they're have a couple of beers and their ability to know how to flush.
I've found myself many times thinking those guys need to lay off the protein bars because wow, I'm just saying, where they're coming out full logs and they're going in sideways into the toilet. When you have to reach in with a stick to break it up to get it to go down, there's an issue.
Yeah, a little bit too much fiber there. That's true.
And
then, of course, there's the stuff that comes out the other end when the guys have been, drinking a little bit too much before the match. They get pounded in the stomach a little bit. They come back and they're already blown up. Have a couple more, swigs and platoon. There it goes.
There was times when I get blown up walking to the ring.
Yeah.
I mean, it did happen. So, earlier I was saying that I'd love to talk with you about trying to like rebook some like really, really bad angles. So let's just real quick take a couple of bad angles. So that way we at least cover the topic we were talking about.
That's fine.
A couple of bad angles that happened throughout the course of the years, and maybe tweak them and see if we could possibly make them any better. Might even just make them worse, to be perfectly honest. Might even just make them worse.
Given the state of the WWE right now, there's no way we could make anything worse. That's not
right out the gate, I know they didn't have the money. We could go over it ad nauseum, but with the talent that they had available, what could they have possibly done to make the WCW invasion angle any better?
Well, that was one of the problems, I think, was that whole concept that you've got to pull everyone in all at once, and that they had no way of pacing it or, slowly dissolving WCW and introducing wrestlers. It was all of a sudden you just had this huge flood of talent. And the WWF was sort of like, or the WWE had to say, sink or swim. We're going to push you. We're not going to push you. We're going to push you. We're not going to push you. And there are a lot of guys that had a lot of talent that just got, completely lost in the shuffle at that stage. And you can't push everybody. You can't push them all at once anyway. And so, yeah, I would have tried to maybe do sort of what they did with Next before Next happened. Is sort of make WCW into sort of WWE's minor leagues, and like guys get promoted up to the WWE or demoted down to WCW, and make it like a really separate product. And then maybe, you do your more wild experimental ideas in WCW, see if they work, and then if so, bring them up into the WWE. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great idea. I know that it came down to the television network didn't want a WCW branded show. They just wanted WWF at the time. WWF was riding on this huge wave in 2000, 2001. They had just obliterated WCW. They kicked it so hard there wasn't anything left. So
yeah, they wanted that salted earth policy. They wanted Vince wanted the world to forget WCW ever existed.
Yeah,
and ECW for that matter.
Yeah. So he buys it up, and what I think should have happened is they should have had it as a separate entity and tried to rebuild it as the other contracts were coming available over the next year or two. All of those guys ended up coming eventually, but they weren't willing to come to WWE, WWF at the time. They weren't willing to come there and take a huge hit in money. They would be silly. Why am I going to stop getting paid $700,000 to sit at home for a year when I can go work my butt off and go get $300,000 and go be on the road for 250 days a year? It's just a real simple math equation. And again, I'm a redneck from down here in like the Podunk area of California. I know you always call me your country cousin. I'm not good at math. I don't even own a calculator. On my phone, the calculator doesn't even work. And if it doesn't, I don't know how to do it. I've got a 9-year-old son. I got to ask him to show me how to make it work most of the time. But just simple math, that doesn't work. You're not going to take and say, man, I totally want to do that. I'm going to go work for $350,000 and work $250,000 or 250 days a year. You're going to take the high pace sitting at home, resting your body, and then you're going to be more valuable when the thing doesn't work. And that's exactly what happened with each of those guys. Goldberg in 03, all of the NWO guys, Nash, Hall, Hogan. Sting didn't end up coming for the longest time. I think he came too late, to be perfectly honest. But had they have taken who they had, the young stars, and then maybe transitioned a few of the already established WWF stars over into a WCW that was maybe a little smaller, I think that they could have really worked on building that and then implemented the other guys coming in, and eventually they could come against each other at a yearly Survivor Series style thing, or even at WrestleMania.
Clash of the Champions type thing.
Absolutely. Why not have something like that? That's a much better use of your time and talent. They spent $4 million more or less estimated to purchase WCW, and that's including the tape library. The tape library is really where it's at. The ability that, and they made their money back on the tape library almost immediately with the rise and fall of WCW's DVD, which was an amazing DVD. It was put together really, really well. But
yeah, okay. Well, that's that. Let me see. I was just thinking to myself, like, it's sometimes amazing. Yeah, that's dangerous.
Anytime. Yeah, I hope to got my clothes on in this thought that you're coming up with. I know how you are, buddy.
WCW World Class had an amazing level of talent, and they had a TV show that was on ESPN every single day.
Yeah.
Like from 12 to 1 o'clock. I used to watch it and record it all the time. And then it turned into Global. And both of those feds were basically huge failures. But it's amazing to me they had so much right there in their grasp. What do you think could have made Global not fail so bad?
Global was, in the very beginning, fantastic. Global had a lot of, and that's my opinion. And I know
everybody. They had a lot of talent.
They really did. They had a lot of promise. In the beginning. They were all being told there's a lot more money here. Ulianami is the Nigerian prince that apparently was dumping like $28 million into it, and that was the idea in the very beginning. Joe Pedicino was basically being lied to, and it eventually
he just died too. By the way, did you know that?
Did. Pedicino, of course, was the owner of Global and was, of course, the voice of Global for a long time. And he was married to Bonnie Blackstone, who was an amazing interview lady from Global and at one point WWF. But they ended up doing a really good thing with the thing in the very beginning. They had a great deal worked out with ESPN. They bought the ESPN time slot from Jerry Jarrett. And so Jerry Jarrett had the ESPN time slot when he purchased the World Class area, and he rebranded it the USWA to then match his part of the USWA that was in Memphis. It was two separate territories,
right.
But they ran Jerry Lawler as the world champion of the USWA and had him go to each of them, to the Texas territory as well as Tennessee and the Memphis area. And the thing is that Joe Pedicino ended up buying the ESPN time slot from Jarrett after Jarrett had acquired it from the Von Erichs from the World Class thing. Some would say that he stole it from them. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but you know how everything in wrestling is a work. So Joe Pedicino, in the very beginning, had a great deal worked out with ESPN, where it was daily shows at the end of the day. It was like kids getting out after school, getting home, and wrestling's on. And they would have tournaments in the very beginning to crown the first television champion, the first North American champion, the first tag team champions. I remember those tournaments. The Patriot, Del Wilkes, became a huge star, all thanks to Global. And I would say he's probably the only real star that came out of there.
Oh, no, that's not true. The Soul Taker.
That was made there.
The Soul Taker started there, and so did the 1-2-3 Kid, the Lightning Kid.
The Lightning Kid had a great run there. Yeah.
They had some great guys to start with, and then they all went to the WWE. So it didn't really last for that long. But it's amazing they had that lightning in a bottle, and they just weren't able to turn that into making themselves into a viable second federation. They sort of remind me of where like AEW and NWA kind of are now, but just couldn't make that next step up before they failed.
They were fantastic in the very beginning. I really liked Global the first year or so that they ran. Eddie Gilbert was booking at one point, as well as Demolition Axe. Bill Eadie was a booker there in the very beginning, and they just didn't have the money behind it that they claimed that they did in the very beginning. So people started realizing, like, the money's not there. My payoff isn't looking that good. And then instead of flying people in, it started to become more and more of, we're going to work in Atlanta, we're going to work elsewhere, and then pretty soon we're just going to stay in Texas, and then we're just going to stay in the Sportatorium, the Dallas area, the Sportatorium, and that's it. We're not really getting outside of this box. And so then they're using Black Bart and Killer Tim Brooks as he as you talked about.
Yes,
yeah. So those are the guys that ended up getting used, unfortunately. And towards the end, Mike Davis was looking for moon rocks, and Maniac Mike Davis was looking for moon rocks.
I remember that.
Global started off real strong with the Patriot and the Dark Patriot. Of course, Doug Gilbert under the hood. Eddie Gilbert eventually ended up taking the North American title and leaving and going over with the belt onto USWA television at one point, and did like a little title versus title thing and called himself the Global World Champion, challenging the Unified World Champion of Jerry the King Lawler. But yeah, Global was good, and I have really strong, fun memories of it. It's one of those things that petered out. The only thing they probably could have done to make it any better is keeping people happy, keeping your talent happy. Maybe not thinking so big. They were trying to cram 30 pounds of crap into a 2-pound crap bag. And that's just way too much. That's like 28 pounds of crap too much. I don't see how I did the math right there. I did that with my head. Didn't even have a calculator.
Well, yeah, I mean, 5 days a week. It's, when you think now about trying to book a show 5 days a week, and I know they didn't do all 5, they didn't do a live show every day, but it means you still have to record a phenomenal amount of wrestling and a phenomenal storyline, if you're going to do that. I think that was the other thing too, is that they kind of got the creative side of things. They were on so much that they were drained out of the idea of trying to come up with something to do with these guys and the creativity. Once guys like Edie were gone and so forth, they didn't have much. They just had guys getting in there and wrestling, and there was really no storyline whatsoever behind what they were doing. So now I wanted to because we have a few minutes left, wanted to talk to everyone about the Super Gamer Boys.
Oh, excellent. So again, I am not only the greatest announcer in the history of pro wrestling you've never heard of. I also weekly am on the Super Gamer Boys. The Super Gamer Boys is a gaming podcast all about current video games, PlayStation, Xbox, PC. Not that I know how to turn one of those on or do the little mouse thing with the clickers. I'm not good at that stuff, but I love video games, and I love to talk about video games. And I'm kind of a little goofy. I'm not the serious one. The other guys on the show, Zetch Keenan and Garrett Moorlang, are a couple of nerds. I'm there to keep things cool, folks. I'm there to try to bring levity and awesomeness each and every week. You can find us on any of your regular podcast apps. You can go on to Apple, iTunes, I guess. I don't understand how any of that stuff works. Podcast Addict, Overcast, Stitcher, Spotify. You can find them. Check it out. Super Gamer Boys. We talk video games every week, all the news, all the updates. And then I tease them and say a whole lot of misogynistic and probably borderline racist stuff. It's pretty great.
Now, since the subject is video games, a couple things. One is, what is your favorite wrestling video game?
That's a great question. That's a great question because, buddy, I grew up in an environment where I loved video games that had wrestling in them. Tecmo Wrestling. There was lots of great. I remember the NWA had World Championship Wrestling, and it was horrible, but I had so much fun with it. Probably one of the hardest games of all time, WWF WrestleMania. I don't know if you played this game. It came out in 88 or 89. It was Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant was imperceptibly hard, just ridiculously hard to fight in this game.
Well, you could also be Lex Luger and Yokozuna in that game. Was that the one that
WrestleMania Arcade, WrestleMania the arcade game? And
you're
so
talking
that was,
Russ. Oh, for the PlayStation. Okay.
yes,
So
yes.
it's, you know,
The
I don't
NES.
have, yeah, I don't have the knowledge of the PlayStation stuff as we talked about. I don't do too many console games, but I'm heavy into the arcade stuff, and I also do. I'm a PC guy.
I thought
What
you weren't
about
technically allowed back into arcades since that thing in '93.
what?
I thought you weren't technically allowed back into any
Oh
arcades
yeah,
since.
no, that's why emulators, my friend, emulators.
Yes.
But what about WWE Superstars or WWF Superstars? The one that
WWF
the tag
Super.
team, the one
Yeah.
where it's got the Ultimate Warrior and Ted DiBiase and Sergeant Slaughter in it, and Earthquake, and
Yes.
you eventually take on the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, for the.
That's one of the best video games of all time, and that's a stand-up arcade game, and just completely love it. I don't know if Superstars is the name of it or if it's Wrestling
There
Challenge.
was
I'm not.
Superstars. There was Superstars. That was the first one, and that's the one where you could be the Honky Tonk Man, or you could be the Ultimate Warrior, or Hacksaw Jim Duggan, or Randy Savage, or Hulk Hogan. But it's you don't have the battle royale feature that you have, and it has a lot fewer wrestlers. Whereas the WWF Superstars one from the arcade, WrestleMania or WrestleFest. That's the one.
Wrestle. Yeah. Yeah. When I was
Wrestle.
a kid, I always wanted to be Hulk Hogan, and I always wanted to be the Macho Man. I'd run around, yeah, tell everybody, oh yeah, check it out, buddy, Sotello, oh yeah, oh, what you gonna do, brother? Yeah, yeah, dig it, snap
Any
into a.
louder, and the police are probably going to show up.
Hey, whatever. You know what? They put stops here. Don't even worry about it. You know something, dude? What they gonna do, brother? They ain't gonna do nothing, dude. I'll just put the old 14-inch pythons, brother. You know what I mean? You get that.
He has the old lady flappy arms now too, which is kind of scary.
I do too. It's kind of. I don't even want to joke. I put the fan on and they're swinging a little bit. That's what happens.
Well, also you used to have another person inside of you, basically. So,
and I had to let them out. I had to let them out because they kept talking a lot, and I think they were telling people about it.
Yes. Well, he took his weight with him, so you're
right?
looking so much better there. Now, as a treat for myself, for my birthday, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, I actually today got myself Borderlands 3.
Oh, Borderlands 3 looks fantastic. I played Borderlands 1 and 2. Those are great games, and I'm glad to see that you treated yourself, man. That looks like a lot of fun.
I also go back to the original Borderlands as well. That's it. I'm a little surprised with all the hack movies there are out there that nobody's tried to make a Borderlands movie. I think it's one that actually would play pretty well Hollywood-wise. It's got both that Mad Max feel to it and steampunk kind of feel to it. Plus, it's got an amazing cast of characters that I think would play well on the big screen.
That's interesting. And people say I have that Mad Max feel about me.
Yeah. The mad something,
however you want to look at it.
But last time I saw you, you were playing The Last of Us.
Yes, The Last of Us 2. Everybody's talking about it right now. I love that you stopped in. I had a live stream that I was doing on twitch.tv/the Super Gamer Boys. Every once in a while, we'll do some live streams. And I did a live stream playing The Last of Us 2. And you were in the chat, and you were telling me where to go. And it was just like we were doing commentary in days of old. You're like helping guide the ship. And I'm like, this is amazing.
Well, it was like Mystery Science Theater 3000, just being able to make snide comments left and right on everything you were doing and distracting you. Well, let's face it, The Last of Us has more than a few scenes where you're just sort of running around, so you're not actually at least where you were at, you weren't really in big combat or anything like that.
Yep.
Just one small part. So, which did look pretty amazing, by the way. But I was just trying to distract you and get on your nerves at some point.
You did beautifully. I appreciate it. And you know what else I appreciate?
Never
I appreciate you having me on your show. I've been listening week to week with you and Evan, again, I hope the hips get better, man. Next time you want to probably pre-stretch. That's what you want to do. There's like a thrusting motion with your hips. Work them out. You won't have so many issues with them in the future. But Evan, Godspeed. I know you're going to be fine. And if you want to follow anything that I'm doing, which isn't a whole lot, you guys can always, if you're listening to the show right now, go over to Twitter on twitter.com. Follow me at JJ Purdom. That's JJPURDOM. And I promise you'll have fun, because that's what I try to do, is just have fun. So,
and this has been another great show. I can't believe that we pretty much, wasted everybody's time for a solid hour. Anyone who's paying attention to this at this stage, if they're still with us, haven't driven their car off the road, or haven't, switched over to, Candy Crush or whatever they would normally be doing at this hour. But it's really fun talking to you. I really appreciate you filling in on short notice for Evan. Do you have any other parting thoughts to leave our audience?
No, other than just you guys keep listening every week. This show is really great, and it's just going to keep getting better and better, because he's not going to have me on all the time. So I promise Evan will be back, classing the joint up as soon as he gets his hips better. And also, I got to go, because I got to go play some Candy Crush myself.
Well, thank you so much for being here this week, and we'll see everybody next week. Thanks so much. Good night.